Yo guys, how are you doing? Welcome as always back to Rule of Two Review, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Samus Returns. So I know it may sound crazy, but we are literally less than 2 months away from Metroid Samus Returns on the Nintendo 3DS, coming out at the end of September 2017, and I'm really starting to feel it, you guys. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting the hype, I'm getting the buzz, I'm getting the excitement of a brand new Metroid game that this time will actually star Samus, which kind of feels like a novel idea, the way last year played out in the Metroid world, and it's an amazingly exciting time, you know? I mean, who could have thought that after E3 this year, we would have 2 brand new Metroid titles to get excited about, and who would have also thought that one of them truly would have been a 3DS game? So obviously, Metroid Prime 4 is the big cheese. That's the big game that we're all really waiting for. The next console, next generation Metroid title. We haven't had one of those since 2010. So it's going to have been 7, 8, 9 years, whatever, by the time Metroid Prime 4 finally hits the Switch. Everyone's very excited for it. I mean, I've talked about it, I don't even know how many times since E3. And luckily, you guys don't seem to be getting sick of hearing me talk about Metroid, which makes me very happy because that's my favorite game franchise, and I do love talking about it on Rule of Two Review for you guys. But outside of Metroid Prime 4, of course, Samus Returns is a unique title in a unique position, and that's what I was hoping to chat with you guys about today. So when thinking more and more about Metroid Samus Returns and what that game represents, how excited I am for it, how excited a lot of people seem to be, it's very wonderful to see so much buzz and excitement and positivity surrounding Metroid and the Metroid franchise again, due to E3's announcements and due to Samus Returns being right around the corner. In thinking about it, I started to realize what really makes this game unique and special, and some of the more important facets of the title that I think we all need to be paying attention to, and that myself, as a diehard Super Metroid superfan, really wanted to talk to you guys about and sort of lay out for everybody. So there's a couple of bullet points surrounding Samus Returns that I was going to touch on with you guys today. The first thing that jumps to my mind when I think about why Samus Returns is a uniquely special and important Metroid title at the time that it's coming out at the end of 2017 here. The first thing, and probably the most important thing, is I feel like Samus Returns represents kind of the revival of a new era of relevance for the Metroid series, for the franchise, for Samus as a character, as well as building, or at least beginning to build, the hype for Metroid Prime 4. This really sort of builds off the idea I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about the fact that it has been a long time since we've gotten a true Metroid title that's actually a console game that stars Samus, that kind of falls in line of the Metroid game series lineage, and is, you know, essentially a canon story, a story that seems to be relating to some of the other classic Metroid games that we all love. Again, that was 2010 with Other M. And as I always kind of have to bring up, Other M is a game that I very much do enjoy. Actually, I almost love that game. I think it's a very underrated game. But that being said, it is a game that is very polarizing, was very criticized, and not really beloved by as many people as I think Nintendo would like for it to be. So it's been a long time since we've gotten a Metroid game, and that last game really wasn't liked by a lot of people, and that's really a shame. And all of a sudden, we have this new era, like I said, that I feel Samus Returns represents, of all of a sudden, Metroid feels important again. Samus feels relevant, and Nintendo is remembering that Metroid is important, and Nintendo is willing to say, hey, let's bring this character and this series back to the forefront. We've heard your cries. We understand that the gamer is interested still in this series and in this character, despite the fact that there's been some controversy around the last couple of Metroid games. I think that they understand you can't let a series like this die. And yes, it's not a huge seller like Mario games, like Pokemon games, like Mario Kart games. It's not that kind of series. But luckily, I feel like Metroid probably doesn't have to be in order to still be a successful franchise, and in order to still be profitable and something that pleases the fans. And here we are with this, you know, weird 3DS title coming out of nowhere that's coming out in a couple of months, and all of a sudden we can maybe feel that Metroid is safe again to a degree. And I think that we can maybe feel, especially if the game turns out to be great, which I think it will, but of course we have to wait for the final product. And if it turns out to be great, that hopefully we can feel like Metroid is in safe hands again. Nintendo is very caring about this series. They want to treat it with kid gloves. They want to make sure that it's delivering on what a Metroid game is supposed to be, that it's going to be making fans happy, that they're not going to let the series die and just fade away into obscurity, which before E3 happened, a lot of people theorized that. I even discussed it once because I had a lot of people in my comment sections leading up to E3 talking about how they felt, you know, Metroid's probably dead. Nintendo has probably killed it, or they stepped away from it, or you know, they didn't like how Federation Force happened, and so they're just washing their hands of it. And although I did not believe we were going to hear from Metroid at E3, I always maintained I never truly believed that Nintendo was going to let Metroid die. And with Samus Returns right around the corner, I feel like more than ever, we can feel safe that that is not going to happen. Of course, alongside this comes the fact that, yes, Samus Returns also starts to build up the hype and excitement for Metroid Prime 4. Now, probably 2 weeks ago, I made a video discussing the Metroid Prime trilogy and the rumors and theories that maybe the game might see a release on the Nintendo Switch, either as just a straight port of the Wii collection or even like a remaster, which would be super exciting. And I discussed all the reasons why that makes sense and how it could happen, how Nintendo may choose to do that. And one of the main things I brought up in that is, per my theory, that Metroid Prime 4, I think, is actually going to be 2019 or later. I don't think it's going to be next year. I mentioned how Metroid Prime Trilogy would be a great thing to release in the middle of next year or near the end of next year to kind of keep the hype going for Metroid in that period of time between Samus Returns and when Prime 4 comes out. Because I think that that's something that is really important for Nintendo to do. I believe that they understand their big kahuna, the big cheese, as I said at the beginning of the video, is Prime 4, and this represents something very big and bold for Nintendo to bring this series back and to also make it a Prime game. And so Samus Returns coming out in just a couple of months, I mean, literally a handful of months after E3's announcement of the game, they have this game ready to go and release by the end of September. This game releasing at that time is like the first step in Nintendo continuing what, like I said a minute ago, the new era of relevance for Metroid, because all of a sudden we have this classic style Metroid game on a handheld. Just, hey, here you go. This is Metroid, this is Samus, this is what you've been wanting. You know, in a year, 2 or 3 years, hopefully not that long, when Prime 4 comes out, we want you to still be excited. We want you to remember why Samus is great and Metroid is great. So here is the first little tasty morsel. It's a pretty huge morsel, but here's a little tasty morsel of this Metroid Samus Returns game, a remake of the sadly forgotten Metroid 2 Game Boy game. And I think that it's really going to represent kind of the starting line for this huge mad dash we have all the way to Metroid Prime 4. Something else that I believe makes Samus Returns a really special game is the fact that it is probably one of Nintendo's swan song titles for the 3DS. Now, the 3DS, of course, is in a unique position because we know that it's kind of fading out. Nintendo's newest hardware and console in the market is the Switch, which happens to also be a portable handheld gaming device. So in a lot of ways, it's like they have two devices that exist kind of in the same market. And the 3DS being such outdated technology, it's been on the market for 6 years, coming up on 7. The Switch is the brand new hot thing. How much longer of a life could the DS family really have? And I discussed this back when the new 2DS was announced. I do think that, you know, there's a little bit of life left. I think it's going to go through 2018 and probably be done after that time. And Nintendo and Reggie even came out and confirmed that just a few days after I discussed it myself. So we do know that we have something to expect next year in terms of trying to keep the 3DS relevant and release a couple of new games. But as far as big, high-profile, quote-unquote AAA games directly from Nintendo, you know, we just had Pikmin a couple of weeks ago. We've got Samus Returns now coming out, and I don't know how many big AAA Nintendo games we're going to be getting for the 3DS. We're probably going to see a couple of smaller tier titles, probably from Nintendo, a couple of medium-sized, medium-tier, maybe third-party games like another Square RPG, or who knows, a couple of other things peppered throughout 2018, but I really feel that Metroid Samus Returns shows a Nintendo that is ready to kind of begin to put the DS family away, and they want to close probably really strong. And if Samus Returns is as good as a lot of people say it is, and as I think it's going to be, and you out there probably also think it's going to be, it's kind of a great way to do that. I mean, honestly, in an era where the Switch has come out and is doing so insanely well and is setting up a really bright future of several years for itself, it feels weird to have a 3DS on the market that's still getting big, high-profile Nintendo games, but that is exactly what Metroid Samus Returns is. And to me, it shows two major things. It shows faith in a Metroid game on the 3DS, and to me it also shows Nintendo has faith in the 3DS as a device, as a piece of hardware that they have on the market, and also, to be fair, even faith in the 3DS gamer that we would be willing to go out and pick up this new game. I think that they understood there's a special combination happening there of a fading DS console, but a huge DS install base, and a lot of fan fervor for a new Metroid game, and they just kind of mixed those three ingredients into this pot, and here we have Samus Returns that I think is going to be a huge, massive hit of a 3DS game at the end of 2017. I mean, when you think about that, it's really nuts, but I absolutely think it's going to pay off. The next element is something I'm really excited to talk about because I think it's pretty super important, and that would be that Samus Returns also is bringing back tried and true classic 2D side-scrolling Metroid action. And you guys, I am over the moon with joy over this decision to do this, especially because we know it came also accompanied by the announcement of Metroid Prime 4 on the Nintendo Switch. You know, I think no matter what, I and a lot of you would probably still have been very excited for Samus Returns if that was the only game, Metroid game we had announced at E3. But there's no doubt that it's easier to kind of feel better about it because it came alongside of the Metroid Prime 4 announcement, and a lot of people have discussed that as well. But when you look at Samus Returns as, you know, in and of itself, just as the game is right now, it's really great to see Nintendo understanding, hey, you know, the first-person thing was great, and we tried the 3D third-person thing with Other M a little bit, and that stuff is all fine and really flashy. But the 2D Metroid games, man, that is the genesis. That is like the birthplace of Metroid and of Samus as a video game character and a gaming experience. And to see them with this 2017 post-Nintendo Switch outdated 3DS Metroid release title, they also chose to go with the classic gameplay style. And you know, I mentioned this on my video a couple of days ago as well, and I'm going to reiterate that point here. Yes, my favorite Metroid game is a 3D first-person Prime game, but I really do still feel like Metroid is the best when it's in 2D. And it takes me back to being a kid and playing the first Metroid at my friend's house on the NES, back when we were all sharing, you know, codes to kind of get to jump to different points of the game at school and during lunch and during recess and stuff, because that's kind of how we had to do that back then, by the way. We ain't have no internet. We didn't have no cell phones connected to the Google in our pockets as elementary school kids, man. No way. That didn't exist. We had to just talk amongst ourselves about the cheat codes and the infamous Justin Bailey code back in the day for Metroid on the NES. God, I have such great memories of that time. And, you know, I think it's really awesome to see a 2D Metroid game coming out, man, on the 3DS. It's really something that has me very excited, and I'm really hoping that old school Metroid fans are extremely excited for a 2D Metroid game, and I'm also hoping that a lot of the newer Metroid fans, and maybe the younger guys and girls out there who either only know the 3D Metroid games or maybe have never played a Metroid game and are going to make this their first, are going to find something really cool and special with the 2D side-scrolling Metroid, man. I mean, that Metroid backtracking, to be fair, I should call it the Metroidvania style of gameplay, even though we're talking about a Metroid game. That Metroidvania moniker still kind of applies here, and I think that everyone's going to be really surprised when you see how much fun that is, and that kind of backtracking in those 2D maps really is just a blast, and it's a remnant of old school gaming, and I love to see it being made relevant again in 2017 on the 3DS. Okay, now this last element is going to be the controversial one, so to speak, but I really think it's important, and it's something that I've been paying attention to ever since the game's first trailer played back at E3 earlier this year. And Metroid Samus Returns is unique in the sense that I think it's keeping the Other M fundamentals alive. And I know you guys, so many people out there hate Other M, and so many people have problems with that game. And I understand why. I mean, there's only so many ways I can say this every time I bring up this game. I understand the complaints and criticisms. I understand the problems some people have with that game. I actually even agree with a lot of them. I'm not saying that that stuff isn't true or that it's unfounded, but I will say that for myself, I absolutely see way more of the positives in that game than the negatives. And honestly, I think all of the good things that game does far outshines all that bad stuff. So while there are some things that I think maybe were odd choices, if we want to be nice to them. Odd choices by the developers, by Team Ninja and Nintendo, and however that played out. Some of that stuff was definitely odd and not great, but man, there's so much good to take away from that game. And what's interesting is Samus Returns absolutely is, I think, paying respects or homage to Other M to a degree. And I think it shows that Nintendo really understood. They had a couple of unique and special ideas and mechanics in that game, and I think they understood that the aesthetic was really sleek and special, and they didn't want to let that go. And I like seeing that they took, you know, this old Game Boy Metroid game that really has no relevance in today's modern Metroid world. No one ever talks about it. No one ever thinks about it. It's the most unique and weirdly put together Metroid game because you're hunting down 40 Metroids hidden throughout the world that you can't even find because there was no map in the original one, just to fight the big Queen Metroid. And it was just, it's good, but it's weird, man. It was a different game. And so to take that game, remake it today, and combine it with some of the elements of their most controversial Metroid game ever, despite, of course, Federation Force, but, you know, as far as console, like, mainline Samus Metroid games, their most controversial game by far was Other M. And so combining these two games is really strange to me, but I think it's very interesting, and I like to see it as somebody who does really, really like Other M. And just in case you maybe aren't following along here with how I'm comparing Other M to Samus Returns, there's two main things. One is the aesthetic, like I already mentioned. If you go back and compare the power suit, the various suit that Samus is wearing, and the different forms of it in all of the footage we've seen from Samus Returns, it is absolutely 100% the exact same kind of style and tone of Samus and Power Suit as what is in Other M. Compare all the character models, compare the art, and you'll see that that's absolutely what's going on, or if anything, it's meant to kind of evoke it, as well as the atmosphere and ambience of the world, the graphical style I think they chose for the maps and the backgrounds and the enemies and the animations. It's all directly ripped right out of Other M. And then the other big thing is all of the melee combat in the game, which I've said so many times. I mean, like, okay, there's a lot of things about Other M, like I said, I think could be mined to use in future better Metroid games, absolutely. And one of them, I've always said, is the melee stuff. What I really enjoyed about Other M is how they kind of made Samus like a fisticuffs, a hand-to-hand fighting badass. And I mean, I've said this exact thing on a video several months ago. I mean, they really made her a one-on-one badass and somebody you don't want to mess with. She doesn't just have an arm cannon. She doesn't just have missiles and power beams and morph balls. She also could just beat your ass with her fists and her feet. I mean, that's really the best way to make Samus, like this ultimate bounty hunter character, the most intimidating. And Other M is the only time we've seen Nintendo go anywhere near that concept, and I think it was overall executed pretty well. I mean, I like the wrestling move takedown stuff. I think the controls for doing it was a little wonky and awkward, but overall it worked. It was serviceable, and it looked amazing to see. And these same kind of moves are implemented into Samus Returns, and it looks really great, man. I gotta say, running on that engine on a 6-7-year-old portable machine, the way it looks running on that game is beautiful. I mean, it looks a lot of fun and very fluid and smooth and exciting and powerful to see Samus putting these creatures in headlocks and shooting them point blank in the face and just ripping them to shreds. It's really cool. And then, of course, there's, you know, the counter move she has where if some enemy gets close to you or kind of swings down near you, she can just sort of do this punch, backhanded sort of, pa-pa, get the heck out of my face kind of thing. And it looks like a lot of fun, and it all is very reminiscent and evocative of Other M. And I think that is a purposeful choice by Nintendo to kind of bring that back into the fold and remind people that Other M existed, that there was some good in that game. And I think that Nintendo is still maybe proud of it in a way. Maybe there are a lot of things they don't want to die, and so they're kind of, you know, taking those elements, like I said, mining them from that game and squeezing them into this new exciting Metroid game on the 3DS. So those are some of the key elements I see when dissecting what we know about Samus Returns so far, and why that game I think is going to be something pretty cool. I really hope it delivers. I have faith it's going to deliver. A lot of media sites and some of the bigger YouTubers were actually invited to play Samus Returns last week. Nintendo flew them out there to do so. I really wish I had a chance to do that. I should have been in contact with my 2 contacts I have with Nintendo. I didn't even know something like this was going on. I would have liked to try to get myself there to be able to do the same thing, you know, but they never sent me an invite, so it is what it is. I'm a smaller YouTuber in the grand scheme of things, and that's fine. But through this preview event, there's been a lot of positive stuff being said by all of these outlets and YouTubers and whatnot that had a chance to play the game. I mean, some criticisms for sure, but that's normal. The overall sentiment has actually been positive. So I think this game is going to represent a lot of great things, man. We're right on the cusp of a brand new era for Metroid and Samus, and a Nintendo that understands this series matters, this character is important, the fans and the gamers want this character and this series to continue, and if they make the right games that are good games, they're gonna sell like crazy, and they're gonna make gamers happy, and Nintendo's gonna make money, and we're just gonna continue to see more and more Metroid games in the future. Heck, I feel like sometime before the release of Prime 4, I'm willing to bet Nintendo's already gonna start working on their next Metroid game after that. And man, that just feels so good to say. So that's it for today, guys. I always love talking about Metroid, and I haven't talked specifically about Samus Returns much yet, and I felt like with less than 2 months to go, today was a good time to do so. So I want to hear you guys discuss Samus Returns, if you're excited for the game or if you're not excited for the game, the elements and bullet points I touched on today as far as why I think Metroid Samus Returns is a very special, unique game that has a lot of good things happening that could really spell a very positive future. And yeah, discuss that stuff below, you know. And like always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This, of course, is Rob of Rule of Two Review. And as always, I will catch you next time on another video.